Thank you, Acting Deputy President. And we need to get to the crux of this bill, and that is they want to expand. This bill wants to expand the Water Trigger Bill powers of the federal bureaucracy. And having been working down here in Canberra for the last 4 years, I can tell you there's only one word that ever comes out of the lips of the federal bureaucracy when it comes to actually trying to get resource projects up in this country, and that is no. We have got state governments who are responsible for approving these regulations, and I want to qualify that we should protect our water reservoirs and aquifers by all means. Very passionate about that myself. But I don't see why we should give more powers to the Commonwealth when these companies have to already jump through hoops at the state level. And all this will do is effectively create another hoop that the mining companies have to go through to get their projects approved. And I have to mention that I haven't heard anything this morning said about the impacts of renewables, in particular wind turbines, and the bisphenol A that is in the epoxy resin on those wind turbines, as well as what's going to happen to all the cadmium and everything as those solar panels erode, because there is no recycling scheme for renewables in this country. So it seems to me that it's targeted at one particular industry and not at another industry, and that is why I'm pleased to say that the Coalition is opposing this bill. There's no need to have the federal government step in and override the powers of the state. And look, I'm happy to assess the powers of the state. I've often said we need to have a federation convention that looks at the duplication of roles and responsibilities between the state and federal governments, because there is way too much bureaucratic tape in this country, and it's killing industry and it is killing progress. And if there's one thing I've known from my time when I travelled across the world, Australia is world-class and looks after its environment better than most other countries in the world, if not all other countries in the world. And the claim that somehow our environment is in terminal decline is absolute rubbish. And it's funny, I'll look back on old photos. I know, for example, at our own property in Western Queensland, there's more mulga out there than ever, actually, and that's actually come at the expense of the grasslands, the Mitchell grass and things like that should be growing there, because we're not allowed to manage the mulga like we should. So, by all means, let's protect the environment, but at the same time, we already have departments at the state level, and I know, for example, Link Energy was fined. The state government, the Labor state government at the time, was a bit slow getting onto them, I have to say, and that, of course, impacted my hometown of Chinchilla, and that was known for a long time. But we need to take these claims of doom and gloom with a grain of salt. I know Professor Terry Hughes from up at North Queensland made a claim in a Senate estimates inquiry a number of years ago that there was coal dust all over the Great Barrier Reef, and that claim was absolutely debunked when they looked into it. I myself was up at Port Abbott Point with the current member for Dawson. He wasn't the current member then, and I couldn't get over. We went out to the Abbott Point coal basin, and we actually had a look at the terminal where the coal gets shipped off overseas, and there are actually stingrays and giant trevallies swimming around. The water was pristine. So we have to take the claims, and the same for gas. I mean, gas has been bubbling out of the Conda mine for hundreds of years. I mean, my family was a pioneering family in that area in the early 1900s, and there were claims, there were sightings then of the gas bubbling up through the river. Not to say that, fracking isn't a risk. It is a risk, and we have to address those risks properly. But I don't think going through two hoops and having two departments, especially a department in Canberra, who we know and we saw it in The Voice, are totally out of touch with the rest of Australia when it comes to actually trying to keep these people in real jobs. I mean, it was their crazy neoliberal ideology in the Treasury Department that effectively shut down manufacturing in this country. So they're the last people, the Canberra bureaucrats, we want to trust when it comes to looking at resource development projects in this country. And the other thing I want to touch on when it comes to the Water Trigger Act, and I'll give a shout out here to a former Labor Prime Minister, Ben Chiefeley. He, in some respects, actually instigated the first Water Trigger Act, and I like to raise this because he actually introduced the national security powers under 51(6) back after World War II in order to get the Snowy Hydro scheme up and running. At the time, the states were initially against it, and Ben Chiefeley very cleverly said, well, water security in this country is a national security concern, and I think it is. And so he just went ahead and started building what became one of the great infrastructure projects this country has ever seen. And I would love to see the same thing continue to happen today. And I think, we often talk about, I'll come back to the East Coast. I know some of the other people have been talking about Western Australia and Northern Territory. We need to get water. We shouldn't be taking water out of the Murray-Darling. We need to be getting water into the Murray-Darling Basin. And there is a very big river that runs parallel with the Great Dividing Range from just below Warwick all the way down to Grafton and then runs out to sea, and that's the Clarence River, and it runs from the north to south for about 200 kilometres, and then from just above Kempsey north for another 100 kilometres. And the beauty of this river is it runs parallel with the Great Dividing Range. It stays high, and it's in a high rainfall area. And the original John Bradfield, this was a part of the original John Bradfield scheme, and this is something I think we need to look at. We often talk about bringing water from the north to the south, which is totally unfeasible. It won't work. The water will evaporate before it even gets to Lake Eyre from North Queensland. I'm not against pushing some of it west as far as Hewiton, but we really need to look at it doing it the northern rivers in New South Wales. And the beauty of doing it on the Clarence is that you only need a 10-kilometre pipeline to get it back into the Guida River and into the Copeton Dam, and then from that point onwards you've got it into the Murray-Darling system. And the water would come in above the Macquarie Marshes. One of the paradoxes of the Murray-Darling system is if you actually drive west from Sydney and you go to Bathurst, you'll actually see the start of the Macquarie River there. It's very easy to remember. The Macquarie runs north, and the Lachlan Macquarie I often refer to. Lachlan will run southwest, but the Macquarie runs northwest all the way right up to Burke. And then turns around and then runs south. So we get a lot of evaporation, and it's got to go up through the Macquarie Marshes, as my colleague from New South Wales, Senator Cadell, is nodding his head. So you get a lot of evaporation just through there as well. But if you can get that water into Copeton Dam from the east coast and push it through, you could take, say, 2 or 3% out of the Clarence, wouldn't touch the sides with the Clarence, but then you would actually get an enormous amount of water. That would make a big difference to the Murray-Darling system. And that could not, it's not just about irrigation, it's also about environmental flows as well. That is something I think that we need to look at doing, along with other projects like changing the barrages in South Australia. It's absolutely ridiculous that the lakes in South Australia are actually fresh water when naturally they're estuaries and are actually more salt water or brackish water, and that we actually let all the water go from Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria down to South Australia, and we get large amounts of evaporation. So from my hometown of Chinchilla again, where we sit on the Condamine, the mighty Condamine, that flows all the way to South Australia. But for every 11 litres that crosses the border, only 1 litre makes it to South Australia. So I ask you, why are we letting so much water evaporate, or when it does get to the sea, just run out to sea, rather than actually utilising it on the way down? Now, I'm all for making water efficiencies projects, introducing water efficiency projects, and another one would be at the Menindee Lakes. But yet again, we get lots of misinformation. Whenever the Menindee Lakes dry up, we get all this, oh, the Menindee Lakes are dry. But the thing about the Menindee Lakes is it's only 20 feet deep. You get 12 feet of evaporation every year. So if you don't have much rain out in Western New South Wales, it's going to basically evaporate in 2 years. And I know that because where our property is out in Western Queensland, our dams, we've got a house dam that's 20 feet deep. I mean, if we miss out on summer rain, we're going to run out of water by the end of the second summer. So that's something that, yet again, doesn't get spoken about. But if you wanted to preserve stop the evaporation, put a wall halfway through and make it actually, rather than have it sitting at, say, 6 feet over a wider area, halve the surface area and have it sitting at 12 feet so you have less evaporation. And it's things like that we need to look at. But anyway, look, I'm glad to say that we won't be supporting this bill today, not because we don't care about the environment and not because we don't want to preserve our water reservoirs and basins, but we just don't need any more red tape. We're better off taking that money spent on the Canberra bureaucracy and actually looking at the building a dam on the Clarence River, like Ben Chiefeley did back after World War II, and pushing some of that water out into our Murray-Darling system.
Authorised G. Rennick, LNP Chermside.